I really loved the Dead Space franchise and played every part including Extraction and Ignition. I even played the DLC for part 2, which concludes the storyline of Extraction. I will probably play through the entire series again at some point and make videos about them too. So my expectations went through the roof when I heard that Glenn Schofield had a new studio and is working on a spiritual successor to Dead Space, the Callisto Protocol, and the pre-release material was looking pretty good. What didn't look so good were the reviews when it was released. But now, quite some time later, I was able to check it out as the PS4 version was on a sale at a local store. So how did I feel about it? Well, it sucked. It sucked hard. I thought about the "we have McDonald's at home" meme while I was playing the game, as it fits so perfectly to this game.
You say, "Mom, I want to stop and get some McDonald's." She go, "I got hamburger meat at home."
This is it. This is "we have Dead Space at home." But let's get through all the things I didn't like. The story throws two settings at you immediately. One, the feral woman from The Boys is at Europa, a station which has suffered from some kind of biological warfare, which left almost everyone dead. Without learning much more, we jump to Jacob, played by Josh Duhamel, known for Transformers and dating Fergie, and for sweating profusely for the entirety of the Callisto Protocol. Seriously, wipe it off or go see a doctor, this doesn't look normal. Jacob is a smuggler and is crash landing onto Callisto. His partner in crime doesn't survive though, and he is arrested by Sam Witwer, who plays Captain Ferris, a mean guard of the Black Iron prison, which is located on Callisto. Jacob is brought to the prison and has a display operated onto his neck. He wakes up and soon the prison is overrun by some kind of weird space zombie. He gets out of his cell and is soon navigated through the prison by another prisoner, Elias. Jacob finds a pickaxe and is fighting against the zombies with a rudimentary fighting system. But after a short while he finds a baton, which is somehow supposed to be better? Yeah, the pointy sharp thing is worse than the blunt thing somehow. We also confront Ferris and throw him out of a window. I bet this won't be the last time we saw him. We continue our way through the prison, walk through corridors which are looking mostly the same, and fight the same enemies over and over and over again, only with a pistol with next to no ammo and the baton, both of which can hardly be upgraded as you have very little money. Eventually you get another version of the pistol and you get to know Elias is a murderer, in a story beat which I can only call pathetic. Jacob seems to be disturbed by this revelation, even though he himself is a smuggler and has killed probably 200 infected at this point. He also seems to be very good in killing stuff in general, so I don't know what his past was, but I guess it involved killing things. I will return to the story later on, also with spoilers, but for now let's talk about the elephant in the room.
Now, while you're in there, I want you to go get in the refrigerator, give me the chopped meat, and while you're in there, get me a green pepper and an onion. And you said, "Ain't no green peppers in McDonald's." I'm not making McDonald's, I'm making your mama's burger. I need a green pepper and an onion. While you're in there, give me an egg out too. What you need eggs for?
Dead Space had a pretty great gameplay and level design, as well as a fantastic and for the player very immersive UI, which worked in the world you played in. For example, in Dead Space you see Isaac's health as glowing bars on his spine. Losing too much health will cause the spine to turn yellow and then red. Also, Isaac starts to walk slower and looks more beaten down, which makes sense and is visible for the player. In Callisto Protocol you also see the health on the back, but not on the spine. No, you see it on his neck. And smaller. You also can't figure out how much health he has when it is in the green area, as the entire health bar is glowing, and it's not very visible how much health he actually has. You can also often not see his health in combat for a lot of the game, as the camera really loves to reposition itself, so that you don't see the health bar or sometimes even the enemy. I mean, look at it. Can you make anything out here? Do you see what is getting hit and where Jacob is? But let's get back to the UI. Because this game has no original bone in its body, it also steals the telekinesis from Dead Space, but once again worse. It's also introduced terribly. In Dead Space you can grab objects and throw them at enemies. In Callisto Protocol you can grab the enemy and then throw them against a spiked wall or an open gearbox, which you encounter often later on. But not when it's introduced. The telekinesis is also immediately empty, making it useless for a long stretch of the game. I actually hardly used it until I upgraded it and was actually able to use it effectively quite late in the game. But what I was actually wanting to say was that the UI here is terrible. To be honest, I'm still not sure if it's supposed to be also on the neck or the lights on the gloves he uses. The inventory is also a bad joke. You can hardly carry anything for the first half of the game, and while you can upgrade your weapons and the telekinesis glove, you can't upgrade your inventory size or health. It just increases once you find a suit in the second half of the game. There are also some logs you can find. For some reason a couple of them can't be started while walking around and have to be listened to while the inventory is open. But that was mostly done in the beginning. Later on I hardly experienced that kind of log. Also, I'm quite mixed about the upgrades in general. Some are okay, I think, but none of them are really great, and I preferred the system from Dead Space very much over this. You get the good upgrades and more money only later on in the game, and Dead Space just felt much better with a lot of small upgrades you can use and feel stronger after a couple of upgrades. But let's get to another point of the gameplay, as I have more to say.
And you think to yourself, that don't look like no McDonald's.
The combat, yes. The stories are true, it's terrible. Feels like it stretches the game for way too long and is repetitive and outright broken and unfair. I played the game on hard for the first half of the game and it was torture. I played all the Dead Space games on impossible, the highest difficulty, so I know how to handle action horror and survival horror. But this? You are forced to use the baton for a lot of the game. Even later, as you can only switch between the rifle or the pistol, which doesn't count for the other rifle or the pistol module. For example, if your shotgun and the pistol are empty, you can't quick switch to the assault rifle or the automatic pistol. It's unnecessarily complicated. Fighting in close combat is also often a gamble, and after fighting the camera for hours, being bored and annoyed by the combat at the same time and fighting those invisible crawling enemies over and over in the area with the robot where you find the skunk gun, I almost stopped playing when an enemy even teleported through a door and tore me apart.
You are tearing me apart, Lisa!
I thought about quitting it.
No chance. This is it. This is the end. No.
But of course I continued.
I was already so far past the point of no return I couldn't even remember what it looked like when I had passed it.
But I turned down the difficulty, not because it was too hard in and of itself, but because I was annoyed and would have stopped if I didn't progress faster. So I continued and checked how much more I needed to go through until I see the end, and I was surprised. I was halfway through.
What the fuck?
I thought I was sticking around at like the first quarter of the game, but I was halfway through. And I still had only the shitty baton and the pistol. And that fucking concert. What the actual fuck? I checked the walkthrough to see if I missed any weapon. I didn't. What is this? What the hell is this?
Wonder Bread. A hamburger is a hamburger. As you make it and put it in the middle of square Wonder Bread.
Pacing. Pacing is important. The Transformers movies have a bad pacing. There's constant explosions, so the viewer gets numb to it. There was also that movie, I think it was called First Cow or something like that. It was incredibly boring, at least for me, because nothing happened in the movie. Games have also pacing, but it's different than movies. There are more things to take care of. If you have a game which is 10 to 12 hours long and there is a lot of combat, you simply can't let the player dick around for half of the game with only 2 weapons and 1 telekinesis ability, which is useless most of the time. The levels look also quite similar. There's nothing really scary in the game, the enemies are generic as hell, they just look like bloated zombies. Like water corpses or something like that. You fight the same variation of enemies over and over again. Once again, pacing. Fighting the crawling enemies at the spot which almost broke me was also especially annoying, as they kept jumping me. They were literally jump scares. Over and over and over again. The robots roaming the prison were also terrible. One hitting you every time they see you. You can kill the robots by shooting their heads off, but as everything in combat is random, it can happen that you shoot him 4 times in the head and it doesn't fall off. Also, when you miss and hit the shoulder and want to correct your shot, you will die before you pull the trigger again, as the robot will immediately kill you, which will cause another repetitive death sequence and a very long loading time on PS4. There are also not many different enemy types. Towards the end you encounter also blind enemies, which you can quickly stealth kill, something which is introduced early on, but hardly works until you reach this enemy, which is super easy, just like the mini bosses which you encounter later on. These 2 grown together guys which hit once, just dodge it and then shoot them until they fall to their knees and can be beaten. Then you repeat until the other one is also dead. In the second half of the game you also get the spacesuit, which increases the inventory and I think it increases the health bar. You also get a variety of weapons, finally, but it's still not much. And very generic. You get a shotgun module and an automatic pistol module for the pistol, and a shotgun, and towards the end an assault rifle. This is way too little and once again quite generic. Dead Space offered a lot of various guns, which were all fun to use and made sense in the context. This is just highly underwhelming, which brings me back to the story.
Around and you got green peppers and grease running down your hand and your mother say, now go on outside and play.
Spoilers ahead. The first half of the game is mostly dicking around and trying to escape, until you walk outside with Elias, who confessed that he was a murderer, and then immediately gets killed when you are outside. But you soon find the lady from the boys again, which is called, let me look this up. Yeah, right, Danny. So you meet Danny again and she still hates you and she still has no reason for doing so. When you find Elias, she cuts out his neck thingy for access, I guess, and shocks Jacob with that, even though he did the same thing to dozens of corpses. Then Danny even threatens Jacob with a shotgun, forces him to walk to a garage so they could escape, which doesn't make any sense as he is the pilot, which he also points out. Jacob finally gets to the garage and reunites with Danny. They fight and suddenly they are friends, I guess, and she even gives Jacob her shotgun.
What?
And when we finally are about to board the spaceship and leave the goddamn game, planet, it gets shot down. Suddenly and without any reason, Danny decides to find the reason for the outbreak, instead of finding a way to escape. Yeah, halfway through the game they decide to tell a story. And it's also not that good, to be honest. We fight our way through the station, we find some generic slums in the station, and fight hordes of enemies, including a monster made out of 2 infected, which I already mentioned. And eventually we meet Ferris again, who turned into an intelligent zombie. Yeah, and I hate it. They ditched their non-story for a super generic story. And that enemy isn't even harder than the others, you just have to dodge more often and then beat him. I also don't know if you have to inflict a certain amount of damage or just go to Danny, but finally the fight ends by getting into an elevator. Danny gets infected, but instead of killing her immediately, he tries to find an antidote. There's quite some more fighting and we return to the crazy lady doctor who is now wanting to help us. Once again, I can't understand why people are acting the way they do in this game, and I forgot who the doctor was. Eventually we bring Danny to her and can somehow connect to her and get an insight into her memories. And we see that our previous smuggler run has caused a disaster on the Europa which killed Danny's sister. At first I thought it was supposed to be her daughter, but no, I guess. We fight the grown together monster many more times and actually encounter some of the blind enemies again, which are positioned in a way that they will encounter and attack you. At least you get some weapons and the game gets finally easier to get through. I even had a full inventory most of the time. Eventually we encounter the main warden who was monitoring our progress. Once again, I'm not sure why he was doing that, but because we still have a couple more cliches to hit in the story, he lets us fight his best specimen, Ferris, to see what is better, humans or his improved species. But before we actually fight, we see him talk to his superiors, who are wearing masks while having their hologram Skype call. We fight the boring fight against Ferris until he mutates and turns into a poor man's Resident Evil boss, which we just shoot in his face shield until it's gone, and then shoot his face. Then a couple of exploding enemies appear and annoy us, as this would otherwise be laughably easy, but eventually we kill that SOB. The station is in even more disarray. We quickly create an antidote and inject Danny, then we shove her into an escape pod. She flies away and we learn that she also knows now what Jacob did to Europa, and she wonders what he is doing now and if he survives. Sounding like she started to like him, now that she actually has a reason to hate him. We cut back to Callisto and see Jacob, in an ending that is also kind of a cliche, but one I actually like, only so the game can fuck it up in the next moment. Jacob is still on the station. He is exhausted, fighting for his life, bloodied and out of breath, but ready to keep fighting when the lady doctor is calling him and offers another escape, only for a jump scare to appear and end this fucking game.
And kids are honest, they say, "Yeah, where you get that big welfare green pepper burger?"
Disappointment. As I mentioned before, I was really looking forward to this, but it was extremely disappointing. This is not just a bad Dead Space ripoff, this is worse. While one can see that there was a lot of effort and money put into this product, there are also some baffling creative decisions. The UI, the combat, the melee combat focus, and simplicity. The enemy behavior, the story, the pacing, the generic environments and enemies. The game feels somehow much longer than it is, and is also quicker over than you think. All these small things that endlessly annoy you. In those 10 hours you play the game, the endless jump scares,
Loud noises!
the annoying combat, especially in the first half, using only 2 weapons for most of the game. I can't understand how a team that worked on Dead Space before could have made this. This one would get a 4 out of 10, but the disappointment and the terrible first half take this one down another point. I give the Callisto Protocol a 3 out of 10.
You cry.
Last Wish, Revenge. It looks slick, moody, and incredibly bloody. Check out this one from the 6th on Netflix. Tom DeLonge from Blink-182 is releasing what he's been warning pop punk lovers for years about. Monsters of California is a sci-fi directed by DeLonge, which follows a group of teenagers who are on the quest for the meaning behind a series of mysterious paranormal events in South. You may know about the was very tickled to hear